Look at him, still broke, still nobody. And now he's got an imaginary wife too?
3 years now, you haven't changed.
3 years? Then where is she, Jalen? Or does she only live in your head?
She's on her way.
Look at him. Still broke, still nobody. And now he's got an imaginary wife too. Brinley said it loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. 3 years now, I said. 3 years. She laughed like the number tasted funny. Then where is she, Jalen? Or does she only live in your head? She had no idea. 2 days earlier, I had signed a $380 million transit contract with the city of Atlanta. My name was on it, not a company name, mine. My name is Jalen Marsh. I'm 41. I build things for a living, and I've spent 20 years believing one plain fact. A man's worth isn't what people say about him at a party. It's what he builds when nobody's watching. 8 years ago, my ex-wife walked out of our house with 2 suitcases and a face that said she'd already left before she packed the first bag. I didn't chase her car down the street. I went quiet instead. People mix up quiet with broken. They are not the same thing. That brings us to a Saturday night in October, inside the grand ballroom of a downtown Atlanta hotel at our high school reunion, my first one since the divorce. I sat near the back with a glass of water, listening to Brinley's laugh roll across the room, the way it used to when she thought she'd won something. Still wearing that same tired face, she told her friends, pointing my way. 8 years, and the man's still alone. Someone I didn't know added, "Didn't he used to talk about building something big? Guess all that's left is a tool belt." I didn't answer. I watched. Here's the part nobody in that ballroom knew yet. 2 days before the reunion, my legal team had finished the paperwork on that $380 million deal. 18 months of work, coming down to one signature, mine. Brinley didn't know that. There was something else in that room too, something even I didn't fully understand yet. A man standing beside her kept glancing at my watch, not admiring it, measuring it, like he was solving a math problem he didn't want anyone to catch him working on. His name was Trey. I'd learn the rest of him soon. My grandmother used to sit on her porch and say, "Baby, the people who yell loudest about your failures are usually the ones most scared you're about to prove them wrong." She was right about a lot of things. She was right about this. 2 days before the reunion, it was a gray Thursday, the kind of sky that can't decide if it wants to rain. My phone buzzed with the invitation while I sat in traffic. My friend Camille had been pushing me to go. "You've spent 8 years building your life back up quiet," she said. "Go close the door properly, not to prove anything." I almost said no. I had a good life, a home, a wife who loved me steady and sure, work that mattered. I didn't need anyone's approval to feel like a man. But something in me wanted to walk back into that room one more time, not as the man who left broken, just as myself. So Saturday night, I put on a plain charcoal suit, no flash. My wife Zaria had a foundation board meeting running late. She runs an education fund for kids on the South Side, work she cares about more than any party. She told me she'd catch up with me there. The hotel lobby smelled like flowers and coffee. A jazz trio played low near the elevators. Outside, rain tapped soft against the windows. I straightened my jacket in the elevator mirror and reminded myself why I came. Not to prove anything, just to close a door that had been left cracked open for 8 years. The first face I saw walking in was Brinley's. She smiled, the way people smile when they think they've already won. "Well, look who showed up," she said. "Still alone, Jalen? Or still swinging a hammer, hoping somebody notices?" I looked her dead in the eye. "No," I said, "I'm married." For one full second, the whole cluster of old classmates went quiet. Then Brinley laughed, loud, performed. The kind of laugh meant to convince a room before it convinces the person laughing. Nobody in that ballroom believed me yet. They had no idea how fast that was about to change. She turned to her circle for witnesses. "Y'all hear this? Jalen says he's married. 3 years, I repeated, steady. And where is this mystery wife tonight? Home? Or maybe she doesn't exist outside your head. Standing beside her, Trey kept his eyes on my wrist, not my father's plain steel watch itself, the number behind it. I noticed. I filed it away. She's finishing a meeting, I said. She'll be here. Brinley waved a hand like swatting a fly. Still nothing, Jalen. Still poor. Still alone. Even if you invented somebody to sit next to you tonight. I let it pass through me without taking root. Anger is a bad tenant. Let it stay too long, it stops paying rent and starts tearing up the walls. Her words dragged me somewhere I hadn't let myself go in years. I remembered a rainy night outside a downtown conference center, years back. I stood soaked through in a thin jacket, while Brinley finished a networking event for a certification program she wanted badly. I'd sold my grandfather's set of framing tools 2 weeks earlier, the good steel ones, just so she could afford the fee. I never told her where the money came from. When she finally came outside and saw me drenched, she didn't say thank you. She said, "Why do you look so pathetic right now?" I said nothing. I said nothing most nights of that marriage. I thought silence was patience. I know better now. There were other nights like that. The double shifts I picked up to cover her sister's wedding gift, while she told her mother it had been her own money. The Thanksgiving I drove 4 hours round trip to fix her cousin's water heater for free, and came home to a cold plate and a closed door. None of it felt like sacrifice at the time. It felt like love, the only way I knew how to speak it. I understand now, a man can pour his whole self into a cup somebody already decided not to drink from. Trey leaned toward Brinley and murmured something, eyes flicking to me again. Calculating, gone as fast as it came. Brinley didn't notice. She was too busy performing for a crowd that was slowly losing interest. "My wife will be here," I said again. "Steady." "Sure she will," Brinley said, rolling her eyes at her friends. "A whole imaginary wife. Almost sad, Jalen. Almost." I checked the time. Zaria's meeting should have wrapped 20 minutes ago. "You know what the saddest part is?" Brinley kept going. "You actually thought you'd amount to something. All that talk back in school about building something real. Look at you now. Same tired suit. Some men just don't have it in them. I thought about all the years I believed, if I just worked hard enough, quiet enough, she'd eventually see me. I thought about the man who stood in that rain, believing his worth was something he had to earn, one soaked, silent night at a time. I wasn't that man anymore. Brinley just hadn't gotten the memo. There's a particular tiredness that comes from being underestimated so long, it starts to feel like weather, something you live under instead of fight. I'd stopped fighting it. Not because I gave up. Because I'd found something better to spend my energy on, building a life so steady, it no longer needed anyone's belief to stand up straight. "You should slow down," I said quietly. Not unkind, just factual. You're about to say something you can't take back. She laughed again, but this time something uncertain flickered behind her eyes before her performance smoothed back over it. Behind her, a woman I recognized from senior year, Nadia, watched with her arms folded, jaw tight. Back in school, she was the one who told you the truth about your science project when everyone else said it was fine. Now she worked compliance audits, checking vendor paperwork on city contracts. The kind of job that notices details most people never think to look for. She caught my eye. She didn't smile. She gave the smallest nod, like she already knew something the room didn't. Somewhere near the entrance, I heard the low sound of a door opening. Footsteps on marble, a shift in the air, the particular quiet a room falls into right before it turns to face something. Brinley hadn't heard it yet. She was still talking, still certain the ground beneath her was solid. It wasn't, not anymore. The doors at the far end opened fully, and the jazz seemed to dim half a step. Zaria walked in wearing deep midnight blue, curls swept up high, moving through that room like she'd never once needed anyone's permission to belong in it. Heads turned. Someone near the bar whispered, "Is that the woman who runs the education fund?" Brinley turned to see what everyone was looking at, I watched the color drain slowly from her face. Zarya crossed straight to me, took my hand, and kissed my cheek in front of everyone. Sorry I'm late, baby. That meeting ran long. Brinley's cruelty that night was never really about me. It was insurance against a fear she'd carried for 8 years. That trading a loyal man for status might have been the worst decision of her life. She needed a room full of witnesses to help her believe otherwise. Zarya walking through that door wasn't just a surprise. It was the exact fear Brinley had spent 8 years outrunning, finally catching up in the one room she couldn't leave. "Oh," Brinley said, her voice losing its edge. "So you're Jalen's wife." Before Zarya answered, she leaned close enough that only I could hear. "Camille called me on the way over. The contract closed this afternoon. 380. Done." That landed quiet in my chest, the way good news does when you've stopped needing it to prove anything to anyone but yourself. Zarya turned to Brinley. "No performance in it. Yes, I'm his wife, and I'm very proud of my husband." My wife. Not a rumor, not an invention, standing right there in a room that had spent 20 minutes calling her imaginary. That's wonderful," Brinley said, forcing a thin laugh. "I had no idea Jalen had." She glanced at me. "Someone like you. Most people don't take the time to find out what someone actually has," Zarya said. Calm, no malice, just fact. Something shifted behind Brinley's eyes. Not full understanding yet. The first crack. "So," she said carefully, testing the ground, "what exactly do you do now, Jalen? Still in construction?" "I run a construction and infrastructure company," I said. "We just closed a contract with the city." I didn't say the number. Some truths don't need volume. They need time to sink in. Trey shifted beside her, uneasy for the first time all night. He'd spent the whole evening measuring me like a problem to solve. Now the math wasn't adding up the way he'd expected. He leaned in and murmured something low, but I caught the tail end. Didn't say anything about him actually having money. Brinley shot him a sharp look. Too late. I'd heard enough to understand whatever Trey had promised her never accounted for the possibility that I might be the one standing taller by the end of the night. "That's great, Jalen," Brinley said, her voice climbing an octave too high. "Really great." She didn't sound happy. She sounded like a woman watching the floor tilt beneath her heels. Across the room, Nadia was still watching, arms folded, waiting. I didn't know yet exactly what she knew. I only knew her face, said Brinley's night was nowhere near over. Nadia didn't wait for an invitation. She crossed the room with a steady stride, like someone who'd waited years for this exact moment. "Brinley," she said, clear and even. "That's enough." "Nadia, this doesn't concern you." "It does. Because some of us have known for years exactly what kind of man Jalen is, and we've watched you build a whole evening pretending otherwise." She paused, letting the room go silent. "What most people here don't know is that for 6 years, Jalen has quietly funded the scholarship fund at our old high school. Every scholarship kid you've all clapped for, that's him. He never put his name on it. He never told anyone. I found out by accident, going through paperwork last spring." A ripple moved through the crowd. Wait, that's been him this whole time? Something tightened and loosened in my chest at once. I thought of the first check I wrote alone at my kitchen table past midnight, telling myself it didn't need my name attached to matter. I'd expected pride hearing it said aloud. Instead, I felt exposed, like a locked door had swung open without my permission. Brinley's face had gone pale, no comeback ready. Nadia turned to Trey, "And you might want to sit this next part out quietly. Because I know exactly what you tried to do to Jalen's company 2 years ago. The falsified subcontractor bid, the shell paperwork routed through a fake vendor account, trying to skim off a city project. It didn't work. Jalen's team caught it before it went anywhere. But I have no doubt Brinley knew. Didn't you? You covered for him." The color left Brinley's face entirely. "You told me that was a misunderstanding," she said to Trey, voice cracking. "Don't," Trey said flatly, stepping back. "Don't make this about me right now." His hand tightened around his glass. The practiced ease slid off his face, replaced by something colder. The The same look he'd worn all night, studying my watch. A man running numbers on an exit, not an apology. Somebody near the punch table murmured to their husband, "I always wondered how Trey afforded that condo on consulting fees alone." Word travels fast, in a room that's already decided to stop being polite. Brinley turned back to me, desperation replacing the arrogance that carried her through the whole night. "You knew about this? About Trey's scheme? And you never said anything?" "I knew," I said quietly. "My legal team caught it. We handled it without needing a scene." She stared at me, like she was seeing me for the first time in 8 years. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Zaria answered before I could. Calm, but unmistakably firm. "Because there's something else you should know, Brinley. Jalen knew about you and Trey long before the divorce was ever filed. Years before." The room went still enough I could hear ice shifting in someone's glass 3 feet away. Brinley's eyes went wide, then filled. "You knew this whole time?" I nodded once. "I knew." "Then why didn't you say something? Why did you just let it happen?" "Because for a long time," I said, steady, no anger left in it, "I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, worked hard enough, you'd eventually choose me on your own. I didn't want to force it. I wanted you to see me." I paused. "You never did. Eventually, I stopped needing you to." She turned to Trey one last time, her voice breaking. "You told me you'd give me the life Jalen never could. What happened to all of that?" Trey looked at her with something close to contempt. "Don't put that on me right now." "I lied for you," she said, shaking now, champagne trembling in her hand. "I told my own mother that condo was legitimate. I told this whole room tonight, you were the better choice." Trey straightened his jacket, already halfway to leaving in his mind. "That sounds like a you problem." I stood there with my wife's hand in mine, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, just a quiet, settled stillness. A door finally closing all the way after 8 years cracked open. There's a version of justice that shouts, and a version that simply stands still while the truth does the work for you. It took me 8 years to learn the difference. Nadia stepped back beside me for a moment. "I probably should have said something years ago." "You said it exactly when it needed saying," I told her. Camille squeezed my shoulder once, wordless. "Some friendships don't need much. They just need someone standing next to you when the ground shifts." I turned to Zaria, and without a word passing between us, we both understood it was time to go. Behind me, Brinley's voice, thin now, stripped of every ounce of performance. "Jalen, wait. Please, just wait a second." I didn't turn around. We drove home through a clear October night, past storefronts glowing gold, neither of us speaking for a few blocks. There's something grounding about a city that keeps moving, no matter what just fell apart 3 miles behind you. Zaria finally broke the silence, her hand on my arm. "You never told me the whole story. About knowing, about the notebook." I glanced at her. "What notebook?" "The one in the bottom drawer of your old desk. I found it 2 years ago cleaning the study. Pages of things Brinley used to say to you. Dated, almost like you were keeping records." She paused. "I never brought it up. I didn't understand. Not until tonight. I kept my eyes on the road. I wasn't keeping it to use against her. I was keeping it so I wouldn't forget who I used to let define me." I exhaled slowly. Every time I thought about giving up on myself, I'd read a page. Not for the sting of it, for the reminder, never again. "You could throw it away tonight," she said, "after all that. I think I finally don't need it anymore." My phone buzzed once at a red light. A text from a number I hadn't saved, though I recognized it instantly. "Brinley, I'm sorry for tonight. For a lot of things." I looked at it a long moment. The light stayed red. Zaria glanced over, not asking, just present. "You don't have to answer that tonight, or ever." "I know," I said, and put the phone face down in the cup holder. Some doors don't need slamming shut. You can just let them ease closed on their own weight. We didn't say much the rest of the drive. Some silences don't need filling. They're already complete. Next morning, I stood on the back porch with coffee going cold in my hand. Zaria came out in the old cardigan she refuses to throw away, and handed me a second cup, even though I already had one. "You knew about the affair for years before the divorce," she said quietly. "You stayed anyway. You kept trying. Why?" I thought about it honestly. Because I believed if I was successful enough, patient enough, she'd eventually see what she had. I thought if I proved myself, she'd choose me. I took a slow sip. Somewhere along the way, I stopped needing her to. I just needed to see it myself. Zaria studied me the way she does when she's about to ask the real question underneath the question. "Do you hate her? After everything?" I smiled, small but real. "No, I forgave her a long time ago." What I hadn't forgiven, not until last night, was the version of myself who thought he had to earn the right to be loved. The man standing in the rain outside that conference center, thinking soaked shoes and an empty wallet were the price of being worth something. I shook my head slowly. I don't owe anybody proof anymore. Not her, not that ballroom, not even myself. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and we stood there a long while, watching the wind move through the trees. The biggest win of the night before hadn't been watching Brinley's world come apart. It wasn't the scholarship reveal, or Trey's fraud finally seeing daylight, or even Zaria walking in wearing midnight blue and turning every head in the room. The real win was quieter than all of that. It was standing on my own porch the next morning, coffee in hand, my wife beside me, finally free of the need for anyone's applause. No ballroom gives you that. You have to build it yourself. Morning by ordinary morning, long after anyone's watching to see whether you will. I thought about the notebook still sitting in that bottom drawer, and decided, standing there in the cold morning air, I would finally let it go. Not for anyone else to witness. Quietly, the way I'd done most things that actually mattered. Some chapters don't need a dramatic close. They just need you to stop turning back to reread them. Brinley never got a reply to that text. Some doors, once you finally walk through them, don't need to be slammed. They just quietly stop being doors at all.